let's move on to the business.
Right, okay. The meeting is now being recorded, Chair.
Fantastic, thanks for that. So our first item is to take the minutes of the previous meeting. And the first thing to do there is just, I think, to acknowledge a couple of gremlins, which is that the way in which the attendees at the last meeting has been presented by the computer got slightly mangled. I think there's some, I think we're all councillors and not everybody's first name appeared. I think that was a computer gremlin somewhere along the line. And another gremlin which crept in was that if you look at the minutes of the last meeting, you'll see that every single item was labelled item 1. So we had, I think, 8 item 1s last time around. So that was something which was spotted, but after it had been dispatched. So just to acknowledge that before we go. So if we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting, is there anybody who was at that meeting who wants to pick up on any issue? So Pete Dore, have you got your hand up there?
Yes, sorry, Alex, I do. I don't know whether we're doing matters arising at this point as well, but just on the very front page, the distribution, Edwards, Morris and Houghton, slightly at a loss as to who they are. So on the front cover, it says councillors, but actually it's everybody.
Yes.
And after Tom Renard, it says Edwards.
Which is Peter here.
After Christine Jury, it says Morris.
Yes. And
after Ross Dallimore, it says Houghton. Was there a reason why they're not full names and whether they're tenants or councillors?
So yes. So the reason they're not full names, as I understand it, is that's the way the technology, the system that you use to record a tenant spat out the names with surnames rather than full names, I think, as I understand it, and that's a sort of gremlin.
It will be right, Chair. I will put that right after the meeting. I'll have it with my colleague who tried the meeting last time, and I'll put that right.
Okay.
The only reason I'm picking it up, obviously, Steve, is because these are public documents, and I think we do have a duty of care.
Absolutely.
Can I take a matter arising from item 1, tenant participation, or
can we
arising later?
Pete, you're breaking up quite a lot. Your sound is a bit weird, but can we just establish firstly, apart from the need to correct attendance, as you've just observed, absolutely, which will be taken care of, I'm sure, by colleagues. Are there any other questions around or queries around accuracy in terms of what we did last time around, or does that look fine? Okay, so in terms of accuracy, we're comfortable. Right, now should we move on to matters arising last time around? There are some actions with action updates on the first page. We've got from the
Alex, sorry, I just noted Peter's got his hand up. Had his hand up. I don't know whether he wanted to jump in.
Peter Edwards, are you? We can't hear you, Peter. We've got no sound. Can you type? Is it possible to type in the chat if you've got any sound? While we
yes, Councillor Dyer's got his hand up for some time.
So Peter Edwards, if you can type your question in the chat, we'll take Councillor Dyer's intervention. Tony.
Yeah, just a very slight one. There was a comment I made which has been attributed to Councillor Paul Dyer. I don't know who Paul Dyer is, but I think that may be me.
Okay, so absolutely. So that absolutely needs to be corrected for sure.
Okay.
Pete Dole.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yep. So just under the tenant participation review and board member recruitment item, obviously we welcome the new members, welcome. At a previous meeting, I raised the point that the Housing Management Board sent me to the, what's it called, Homes and Communities Board. But since the appointment of, oh gosh, I get the chair's name wrong, the woman who is associated with Una Goldsworthy. Since Una's appointment, I've not had any invitations to the Homes and Communities Board, and I'm a little worried that they may have forgotten that we have a seat on that board. Would it be possible to remind them? Because obviously I was elected by the Housing Management Board to sit on the Homes and Communities Board, and since Una's appointment, they've omitted to invite me. And I do feel that the 27,000 families who have landlord services as their tenants have a right to be represented on one of the 9 One City boards.
Okay, can we take that as an action, Sarah?
I will do. There still haven't been any meetings, Pete. So there isn't any admission, but I will make sure that they are aware of your membership and are keeping you informed in the future meetings and future plans.
Thanks ever so much.
Peter, Nigel, you got your hand up.
Yes, it's on the this is matters arising, isn't it, rather than accuracy?
Yes.
Yeah. On the tenant participation review section, the bit following was noted from the discussion that arose and about other ways of making contact with tenants outside the digital channels. The question really is the development of tenant participation as restrictions start to come to an end, if they come to an end. Everything is done digitally at the moment, which certainly in my block limits people's ability to participate. And we can't have meetings, tenants meetings in the community room like we used to with the housing officer. And I wonder if it's worth establishing some sort of timetable as to when more active and non-digital means tenants participation can start. The thing I take part in these service user groups, and very few tenants take part. They're usually outnumbered by the officers in these things. And a key thing that tenants mentioned over and over again who've been involved in tenant participation over the years is the need to return to the local structure, when there used to be local meetings, which involve much more involvement. The council tried a few years ago, but it was locally ridiculous. Like, we had to meet with the whole of South Bristol across the Bedminster, and nobody came to the meetings because nobody could make it. But the time's getting in now with COVID restrictions possibly ending or being wound down, to develop a plan for much more face-to-face tenant participation, localised, particularly around block meetings that housing officers could initiate. There's a whole backlog of things that need sorting out, certainly in our block.
Okay.
And then considering how to get a local engagement of tenants.
Maybe
proper voice.
Maybe useful at that point for I don't know if it's Liz or Donald.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something about Donald? Say something about the review that's ongoing?
Yeah. That's a very timely question. And something I was discussing today with others. We have commissioned PPAS, Tenant Participation Advisory Service. There's no doubt COVID and indeed pre-COVID, tenant participation is never what it should be. And the only way it works around single issues, which are of importance to a particular block or a particular estate, particularly where there's redevelopment investment taking place, or a community issue. And the challenge is always about how to sustain and support people to participate and make it meaningful for them. And being overloaded with officers is not the way to do it. But having said that, then we do need officers to provide support. Otherwise, then we get complaints that we're not providing that support. But I think it's really time to refresh, renew, and reflect right across the city how we do and don't do tenant participation. And as we hopefully emerge out of COVID, it will be the case, I'm sure, that virtual will continue to work for some people and not for others. But it is really important that housing as a people-based service is actually seen on people's estate, from the estate officer up to myself. And that's definitely something which should be on this, I would suggest, on this board's agenda going forward, looking at where's the best place. And there are loads and loads of examples up the country, up and down the country, of good practice and poor practice. So it's just something that never ends. But now is the time to refresh and look at how we can best create a dynamic interaction between tenants and ourselves, which is meaningful. When I say ourselves, I mean the council, I should say. Not ward councillors. I'm not speaking for ward councillors. And their own interaction.
In terms of that, I mean, Nigel mentioned a time scale. I understand there's some thinking going on already, but do we have a sort of time scale for what a review might look like?
Well, my own personal time scale is to get past the budget setting and see what the council is going to enable housing to do, and then so it would be post budget in February.
Okay. So
Alex,
Nigel,
can you hear me now? Peter
I
Edward.
can.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Sorry,
working. Fantastic.
Sorry about that.
So we'll come back to you in a minute.
Okay.
Nigel, did you want to follow up on that particular point?
Yeah, I was going to make much the question of time scale, but the council developed over the years a network of what you might call tenant activists. That is, people who've been involved in the existing forms of participation, people who regularly attend the service user groups and whatnot. I'm just wondering whether it might be worth forming, do this constitutionally, a committee or a subcommittee of people, of tenants and leaseholders who are known to have taken part in tenant participation, to work up a plan together with the officers, with a time scale, let's say by I don't know, by the summer, July, August, for implementation, either from September onwards or in the next year. But there is a network. Council officers must have built up the people on the email list who have been involved.
No,
and see
we
if can get them together and sort something out,
yeah,
rather than just leave it for the officers to produce a plan.
Very happy for independent activists and representatives to come up with their own proposals in the absence of any officers at all. We do not need to be there to enable tenants to give voice to themselves.
Sorry, can I come back? I wasn't suggesting it's independent. I was suggesting it's done with, this group works with the officers, not separate from, but working with them to come up with a plan.
So it's a sort of, is there an exercise in co-creation?
Well, it's tenant participation in tenant participation.
Yes. Okay. So let's just see what's the number of hands up. So Philip, did you want to come in on this particular issue?
Yeah, I'd like to support Nigel.
Okay.
And say that I was a member of, I can't remember the number now, the largest local housing group that we met in Bedminster, in Barton Hill. And we used to have 19 regular members. And we had a housing officers, we had Roger Griffin, who was a fantastic officer, Tim Delarue, several others, and we did well. Round here, you had Gilbert Webster, who sadly died. He ran the tenants group in Bedminster. But there's a nucleus of people, but no one is interested because council officers have disappeared and have been made redundant or they're part-time. I mean, asking a housing officer who probably has 1,000 tenants to work 3-day week, cover those 1,000 tenants and also run a residence group, well, Boris Johnson might be retired soon, but other than that, who's going to do it? No one, because you've cut everything back.
Okay, Philip, I'm going to note your comments and disagree with them because the investment and resources are there, and coming out of COVID, you know, I'm happy to accept the challenge, but I'm not going to accept or agree with the content of what you've said. But obviously the proof is in the pudding, and you can judge us by our future actions and not by your perceptions.
Okay, thanks for that. Pete, Dawn, did you want to add something on the tenant participation issue?
Yes, I did, and I have to obviously declare an interest here because, in addition to being a tenant, I am also a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Housing, former housing officer.
You're breaking up again really badly, Pete.
Sorry, I have to say that here I declare an interest because I am both a tenant and a former housing officer. So on the one hand, I agree with everything that Philip and Nigel have just said. And there was a time when predecessors such as Councillor Paul Smith and previous directors of housing said, in return for making area, in effect constituency, the lowest level at which tenant participation would work, the housing officers would come closer to their communities as a compromise for the closure of neighbourhood housing offices. So we went from having neighbourhood-based housing officers to having a single point of contact at what's now the old KPMG building at Temple Street. And at that time, tenants were promised that technology would be used to take the housing officers into the community rooms, probably a couple of hours a week, maybe half day a week in bigger blocks. And that commitment simply hasn't happened. So the £5 bus ticket to get to Temple Street is a barrier. The inability to always know that the housing officer will be available, even though it is possible to look up the individual housing officer on the website, remains a barrier. And there is now a gap between the lowest level of tenant participation being in effect constituency level and the absence of neighbourhood-based housing offices. So without disrespect to Donald, I think we have a way to go to match the aspirations that were promised to tenants that haven't been enacted. I am aware of the gap between what has been promised and what is currently being delivered. And like yourself, I await the outcome of the budget settlement. I await the presentation on the 30-year revenue account, but I'm mindful of the retreat from neighbourhood-based housing management to centralised housing management, which has left most tenants unable to know who their housing officer is, unable to contact their housing officer, and being told to wait 21 working days for a reply to anything they want addressed. Okay. And I think Nigel is raising a very important point about the lower level.
Well, Pete, my response to that is there's no doubt that having a virtual tenancy officer working out of Temple Street, covering the city, is just simply bonkers and will never ever work. And you know, estates were based in local areas, and housing officers should not only know their patch, of which there are 60 across the city, they should be the face of the service and also the conduit for organising, coordinating things, whether it's in community centres, local churches, wherever it happens to be. And I'm not going to offer a solution to that tonight, but what I would say, given that this is hopefully going to become a very important agenda item, that these are the kind of historical setbacks, things which haven't worked. I mean, we should all learn from what hasn't worked. And from what you've outlined, it just sounds totally daft. And so we need to go forward with a much better solution. But I don't want to put the solutions in you know, in your marriage. It's part of that engagement that we just have to work through and be really positive and constructive about it, but make sure it actually happens. So, you know, so I accept that challenge of yours, and we'll have to work together to overcome. I mean, it just sounds bonkers to me, but you know, I wasn't here when those decisions were made, so that's my excuse. So
a couple of things. So from the point of view of this board today, there's some clear points been made. There's some challenges that have been acknowledged and accepted, but there's work to be done that has to take place after this meeting and outside this meeting to work through what the response to that will be. I mean, that needs to be minuted for today, and there needs a timeline needs to be developed, etc. But I feel like we need, for the purpose of this meeting, that we've got that on the table. And I think the observation that Donald made about saying this is a theme, or it could well be a topic that recurs for this meeting, seems to me to be one which we also need to keep hold of. Silvio, do you want to add on that topic before we move on?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Just wanted to say, just looking at the level of response from the survey, in total, you had about 1,050 residents and leaseholders. But yet, when we look at the tenants that complain, in terms of the next item, it's around 900. So clearly, people can complain, but then the participation is low. So it's useful just to know that. But we've got 28,000 council properties. So clearly the engagement is not that much, and it can be improved. I just wanted to know, just in terms of, and you've mentioned that there's 28 patches roughly about 28 wards, and looking at the respondents by wards, would it be possible to understand the stock of council homes per ward so that we can actually gauge the level of engagement based on the stock that's in each ward? Because currently, yes, you can say 28,000, not sure exactly where there's majority and where there's less. And if we're looking at participation, we need to know where we're going to put more efforts and where, you know, reasonable effort is required because of the housing stock that's in those different wards. Is that possible?
Yes, it is to be so. We do have that information by stock, so we can share that with you outside of this meeting.
Brilliant, thank you.
So that's great. So I'm going to suggest we move on from that at the moment. Nigel, have you got very
Sorry, just one thing to follow up that. It's important to know where the stock is, but another key issue to tenant participation is the nature of the stock, because it's much easier to organise tenants in blocks than it is, you know, in houses and estates, which where tenants are all scattered and broken up. So to get participation off the ground, it's worth focusing on organising in blocks, and then you can build on that to create a ward or an area-wide system. So it'd be useful to know not just you know, the number of stock, but the type of housing that response represents.
Okay.
Because I think the key to it is building in blocks first, and then you know, moving out from that.
Okay. So there's some diagnostic work to do there. I'm going to draw this item to a close for today because we haven't got off matters arising yet, so we need to move on. I mean, there's plenty there to be going on with, and I think there's some commitments on actions to take forwards. What I'd like to do is go to Peter Edwards. About you wanted to raise something before the sound.
No. All it was I was having problems with my microphone.
Oh, okay, right, fine.
Talking about the tenant participation.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain this really, but we put forward a consultation to Councillor Smith years ago, and he turned it down, and we ended up with the forums, and we all know the forums aren't working.
Okay.
So perhaps it might be an idea to look back at what the scrutiny panel put forward in 2019.
I think is that helpful pointer, Liz?
Alex, I'm really sorry. I just wanted to pick on one point. And Donald mentioned at the beginning that we have got TPAS working with us to undertake a review of tenant engagement. And we've got lots of layers to tenant engagement, including things like satisfaction surveys and transactional surveys, formal engagement, local level engagement, community development. We've got lots of layers to it. But one of the things we are doing is TPAS are going to be holding some workshops, and one of them is with involved residents. So we are looking to recruit 2 members from each of our formal panels who might like to be involved in one of these focus groups to talk about engagement, which I think Nigel suggested as well, but we are actually holding that. So I wonder if I could do a shout out if there's anybody who's interested, they could email either myself or tenant participation, and then we could, and if we get a lot of names, then we'll put them in the hat.
Okay, so outside this.
Hang on, sorry, can you just go through it again? What you're asking for?
Okay, so
to volunteer to be on.
I can, if it's easier, shall I send around an email with further details? So rather to take up any more time to all the resident board members.
Yeah. So.
Okay, that'd be helpful. Let's do that. In relation to last time we met, Sarah, can you just run us through actions that we haven't yet covered?
Okay, there were a couple of actions that were in there. So one of which has already been picked up. And sorry, bear with me one moment. I've just lost where my where that information is. So there was one relating to recruitment of the new board members, and the new board members have now been recruited, and we did that using our involved tenant register, which was a citywide register, to try and reach out as far as we were able to do so. Liz, apologies. I'm having problems because I've got many documents to open. You mentioned you picked out 2 actions that were in the minutes from last time. Can you remember the other?
Sorry, Sarah, were you directing that to me?
Yes.
I couldn't hear you very well then. The signal broke up. Could you repeat what you just said to
Yeah.
me? I'm sorry.
Apologies if my signal's breaking up. Liz, I'm not able to access my Outlook items at the moment, and you sent through a reminder of two actions that were in there from the last set of minutes. So if people couldn't hear me, one related to the recruitment of our new board associates, and we tried to reach out citywide as requested, and our involved tenant register is a citywide list of tenants, so we were able to do it in that way.
There was another action point for you from last time regarding sharing the link to what was the consultation on the business plan.
There was a request about the United Nations climate change piece of work that was going on. Pete Daw raised that, and I sent the link to the board members as requested. So there are no actions outstanding.
Okay, thank you for that. So moving on, and the public forum, there's a public forum associated with this board. There's a procedure for submitting appropriate questions or petitions and statements. Nothing in that category has been received for this meeting, so we'll move on. Item 4, housing news, a verbal update.
Okay, so I've got a couple of updates. I'm hoping that my signal will work out and you'll be able to hear me. So a couple of things that I thought that may be interested in. First of all, there are 2 sets of government-led consultation happening at the moment. One is around a review of professional training and development within the social housing sector to help ensure that all residents receive a high standard of customer care. And there's an email address that interested parties can contribute their comments and thoughts. So I will put that into the minutes so that you can have a look at the opportunity, and if anyone's interested, you can respond. The other set of government...
Sarah, on that, what's the deadline for responding, so everybody's clear?
I'll put the deadline in the minutes as well. Okay. The second set of consultation is seeking views on proposals for new tenant satisfaction measures. Again, this is linked to the social housing white paper, and this is led by the regulator of social housing. So we at BTC are reviewing the proposed measures to make sure that there is nothing that we wouldn't be able to respond to if it was introduced. And again, regulators looking to hear from landlords, tenants, and anyone with an interest. So we will share that link and the deadline. So if you're interested, you can read about that and feed in. The third piece of information, some of you may already be aware of, but it was to advise you that 2 of our colleagues, Gillian Durden and Zara Naylor, who are the head of response repairs and planned programmes, are leaving the organisation. They're both retiring. So again, I thought the board might be interested in knowing about the change that's about to take place. So they're both leaving in March of this year.
So certainly Zara has been a regular attender at this board over the last couple of years. So certainly that's contributed to the work of this board. Okay.
Yes, she absolutely has.
Pete Daw.
Firstly, on behalf of the board, can I just extend my personal gratitude to both Zara and Gillian, who has given exceptional service over a very long period of time. And on behalf of the 27,000 families who have benefited from her experience and her dedication, I'd like to pass on my thanks. Picking up on the first point you made there, Sarah, I'm just mindful of you mentioned the government review regarding training and professional qualifications. In days gone by, the late Dr. Peter Boland and indeed others at the University of the West of England, and Alex will know I was a graduate of Professor Malpass, have delivered housing courses, particularly the Certificate in Tenant Participation, which has gone by the wayside. Similarly, the City of Bristol College have delivered night classes in housing, which appear to again have gone by the wayside. Is there currently an offering for training at either level 3 or level 4, which is where those courses sat, made available to members of the Housing Management Board in the style that Dr. Boland delivered, where active participating tenants and new councillors trained together to build the practitioner membership of the Chartered Institute of Housing. Is there a comparable offer right now?
That would be suitable for board members, Pete? That's your question. I don't know, but I will find out and I will get a reply for you.
Thank you very much.
So an important question about sort of local capacity building and sort of facilitation of the work of this type of body, which is, you know, an additional point to the one about responding to the capabilities thing for the government consultation. Subasiso, you got your hand up again?
Yes,
come in here.
I would like to second that. I think it's a useful incentive to have something for tenants, and especially looking at some of the deprivation stats that, you know, if there is modular courses that someone can attain, there's more of an incentive of getting involved and not just being involved generally, but involved in the long term. And also when we're looking at the diversity of the housing sector in terms of those that are involved, I think this is quite a useful thing, that if there is any of these qualifications, that those that are participating can find a way to enhance their skills. So definitely something that needs to be pursued.
Okay, so that will be minuted, and can we invite a report back just on what's there at the moment, if in terms of offer? Okay, well, that's really helpful. Other items, Sarah, on a verbal update, or is that?
Those are the three that I had for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So shall we move on to the Housing Ombudsman self-assessment? So there's a document that we've been offered in as part of our pack. Who'd like to say some words of introduction to this item?
Sarah, did you want to say anything, or shall I just?
No, Sarah, you're here to present on this. I'm not going to steal your thunder.
Okay, so I'll share my screen just in case anyone wants to sort of read along with what I'm talking about, but you've all obviously seen the pack. So the Housing Ombudsman brought out the Complaint Handling Code in 2020. So we did our first annual assessment in December last year. This is something we have to do every year. So we've just completed our 2021 assessment. The results have been published on the website. And this is just a sort of short synopsis of the key points, so that if anyone's got any queries, I can hopefully answer those or take them away and come back after. So the first section is our performance. So this relates just to landlord services complaints. This isn't relating to the whole council or the services that deal with private housing, adaptations and stuff. So we had 891 complaints in that 1 year period between November 20 and October 21. 90.6% of those were resolved at stage 1. That's obviously where we want to resolve most of our complaints. 78.2% of those were responded to within the 15-day target. So that's a quite a jump up from last year, where it was in the mid-60s. And actually in the last quarter that I've just reported on, we are up in, I think, 87%. So above our 85% target for the last quarter. 8.4% of those complaints went on to stage 2, and 84.6% of those were responded to within the 20-day target, again up from last year by about 17%. So we're definitely making improvements. Something we didn't report on last year, but we are reporting on this year and going forward, is extended timescales. So 33 of those almost 900 complaints we extended the timescales on. Most of the reasons for that were because they were quite complex, involved multi-service responses, so collating those responses took some time. So we had good reasons for extending on 74% of the cases, and we informed the resident about that extension just over 50% of cases. So that's something we're working on getting better at, communicating before the extension, before the time frame has run out, so that we keep people informed. And in terms of satisfaction, 35.7% of residents rated their overall resolution of their complaint as good or very good. So we've made a number of improvements in 2021, partly because of my role, which we'll come on to, but also because of this assessment that we did last December. So we've changed our review procedures for residents living in sheltered accommodation who have opted out of regular wellbeing checks. That's a change that that came about because of a specific complaint, as is the next one, where we've updated our policy regarding out of hours emergency calls about no hot water or heating during winter months. We now include details of how to complain and the Housing Ombudsman service in our housing newsletter, Housing News, and in our annual report. And obviously we also publish these details on our website, our self-assessment details. We've recruited a customer experience analyst to focus on complaints and feedbacks. That's me, that's my role. We've updated and republished our corporate complaints policy. We've run a series of webinars for staff about the Housing Ombudsman and the complaint handling code. We've begun developing a complaint handling training program, which is the first session is being rolled out on the 4th of March. So that's been finalised and is now starting the rollout process. We've developed a quality audit process, which is being trialled in our response repairs service area. So 2 sets of audits have happened so far, the results of which will be fed back to Zara, hopefully probably next month now, because we're nearly at the end of January. And we've now established a performance reporting framework, which is again something that I've done as part of my role, which includes a lot of reporting. So going into 2022, we've got some areas that we're focusing on, and that's finalising and rolling out our training programme, which we're doing, and the same with our quality audit process. We're going to look at including details about the Housing Ombudsman on our rent statements and in our new starter packs, new tenant starter packs, and probably on, I think, leaseholder service invoices. I'm not sure what they're called, but it's another thing we're going to look into. And also, in an effort to be more transparent with residents, we are going to start presenting complaint performance data in Housing News, in the Housing Scrutiny panel, to this board quarterly, and at the service user groups that have been mentioned earlier. So there'll be different levels of detailing probably across those boards, but it's something that we haven't been talking about yet and we need to start talking about. So that's it, that's my update. If anyone's got any queries, I'm happy to answer them if I'm able.
Colleagues, so I've got Pete Dole with his hands up and I've got Philip Morris second. So take Pete first, then Philip.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Sarah. As a board member, there are 2 things I'm interested in, and which I would really be interested in seeing visually through graphic realisation. The first is a breakdown of the complaints by equality community. I think there are, from memory, 7 strands of equality. I would be interested in seeing the donut economics, the Kate Rayworth diagram of whether we are in surplus or whether we are in deficit on the number of complaints broken down by equality community, because there is a perception, rightly or wrongly, amongst tenants.
But I can't hear what Pete's saying.
Yeah, I'm struggling. I'm struggling to hear as well.
Okay, Pete. Yeah. Pete, you're very crackly with your. He's disappeared.
Yeah, it said he'd gone.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess he'll rejoin.
He'll rejoin, and
I think I got the gist of what he was saying, which is he wants to see how that 891 complaints breaks down by qualities.
Communities. Yes, that's right. I think it's in there's a perception. I think people's in the middle of saying there's a perception that the rates are different in different communities, and therefore it would be worth sort of unpacking the data to see whether or not that's borne out by the data.
Yeah, so just to pick up, I've had to cancel the headphones in on a different microphone.
Fine, that's better, much clearer.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone. So the perception, and I'm really appreciative of the fact that there can be a very big gap between perception and reality. But the perception amongst residents is membership of an equality community creates a lesser service from the council. And so the diagram that I would be looking to see is the breakdown of the number of complaints in total, broken into equality communities, displayed as a Kate Raworth donut economics diagram, where there's either a surplus of complaints from that equality community or deficit of complaints from that equality community against the 7 equalities community standards. So that would be the visual representation that I would be looking for. The second is the breakdown by geography. Now, Donald, from memory, mentioned earlier, we have roughly 60 patches across approximately 35 wards, which means that there is quite an abundance of ability to use something like Pinpoint, the City Council's graphic information system, to layer the number of complaints per 100 tenants onto a graph of the city and see whether there are any hotspots, whether we're getting a greater concentration of complaints from one geography over another when standardized per 100 units of tenants, for example. These are the 2 diagrams which I would ask for, because I think they would go a long way to challenging the perception that people in the northwest of the city over the age of the 50-year mark do very well, and people in the south side of the city under the age of 35 do poorly.
Okay, so
Sarah,
do you want to respond to
my initial
that?
Yeah, my initial response to the first one is that's almost certainly doable, and I'll add that to my to-do list. The second one is considerably more difficult. So whilst there already is the ability to see certain information on Pinpoint maps in terms of the complaints of where they've come from. However, that's not always accurate or very easy to do anything more with other than to just look at them on a map. It's something that's on my list of stuff that I want to be able to do, but a lot of complaints that we get, well, probably not the majority, but a lot of complaints that we get don't have any address details. And the system that our complaints are logged on is not linked in any way to the system where we manage our tenancies. So it's a standalone system that it is just, if somebody wants to provide their name and provide the address of their issue, they can. If they don't want to, they don't have to, and we still deal with that complaint like we would any other complaint. Sometimes they're anonymous. As long as we've got an email address, then we will, manage our complaint and respond to it. But that means that it can't be pinpointed on a map. And so any results that we do by map is potentially going to be a bit skewed, because it may be that those areas where we get a lot of complaints, a lot of them are coming in anonymously or without all of the details that enable them to be put on the map. So I'd be wary of providing anything at the moment. It is very limited what I'm able to do, but I'd also be wary on relying on any of that information for those reasons.
Oh, right. It was the recording of it that stopped and started again. Yep. Sorry, it threw me. But when I lived in Corbett House, which is a 14-story block, housing news was read by very few, because most of the people who live in Corbett House in Barton Hill couldn't read English because they were from another country. I'd been round, I had housing news about a month ago here, and I went round asking people, there's only 30 of us, there's only 26 of us, sorry, in this block. I'm in a supported housing scheme now, thanks to a stroke and one thing and another. And no one said they'd, loads of people said they'd received it, and not one person had read it. And I went round with my copy. Oh, I got that. Oh, I don't read that. I throw it in the bin. So I just think it should be targeted, perhaps. And, you know, I see it as a waste of money, frankly. And the other thing I'd like to raise regarding the complaint about supported housing, I'm pleased to see that was mentioned and you're doing something. I don't know what you're doing, but you're doing, it says you're doing something. So thank you. I don't know where,
thanks for.
Oh, Sarah Baker, there you are. Thank you.
It's just every time cameras go on and off, people move around the screen. I think that's why they just sort of and when you put your hand up. So I've got, thanks for that, Philip. So I've got Nigel first, and then Subasiso. You're on mute, Nigel.
Should be used to this by now, 2 years. Anyway, the other thing, in terms of breaking down the information, the other thing that would be useful is to try and categorise the complaints. I know there are probably all sorts of problems with it, but it may be possible to analyse it in broad categories like complaints about repairs, complaints about antisocial behaviour, the way it's been dealt with. But that would be really useful, again, to see whether there are problems, to try, as far as is possible, to provide us with information on the category of complaint.
So, Nigel, that is possible already, but probably not in the categories that you might find helpful or that somebody else might find.
Sarah, you've frozen mid-flow there.
Oh, am I back with you?
You're back. You just got to the point people might find helpful, and then and it stopped.
Sorry about that. So yeah, so we can categorize, but not in a way that necessarily everyone would find it equally helpful. We have a variety of categorizations. So we have an initial classification and a problem, and then a root cause. All three of those things are pick lists. And I'm going to be reviewing those with all of the housing and landlord service areas over the next month or so and updating them. But at the moment, they aren't categories like repair or gas issue or anything like that, because they are mostly generic categorizations used by the whole council. So they're things like problem with a policy or communication issue, or so they're really sort of quite vague, generic categorizations.
Okay, so but there's work being done to review those. And think about
there
what might be
is,
more. Okay.
but that work is going to be limited because some of those pick lists are shared by the whole council, and it wouldn't be feasible to have a detailed enough list that applies to every service area of the, you'd end up with sort of 500 things to scroll through if we made it too detailed. So I'm not sure it'll ever be useful enough for what you were asking about, Nigel.
So I've got Subasiso waiting to come in. Nigel and Philip, is it a response to that specific point? Philip, you.
Yeah. What happened to the, what was it called, together document and plain speaking? Instead of having gobbledygook policy complaints, why not do as we're asking? Because we're supposed to have an equal voice with councillors and officials, aren't we? Or was that together document just a piece of wallpaper for the toilet?
No, it absolutely wasn't, Phil. I think Sarah's just letting you know that we will do work to try and categorise the complaints, but it's just how easy it will be to get them into categories that will be meaningful for you. But there will be work underway, and we'll have a look at what we can and cannot do, and we'll come back and share that information with you in future meetings.
Okay. Yeah, Nigel, you want to come back on that point? You're still on mute.
Old age, it's a wonderful thing. I'd have thought the thing about in terms of our ability as a board to review, the service. I would have thought the categories of complaints that are going to the Ombudsman it is quite crucial, because let's say there's a whole load of complaints about repairs, and there's obviously something wrong with the repairs service that needs to be dealt with. So
if you're specifically talking about complaints going to the Ombudsman, Nigel, that's much easier because the volume of those is very small and they can be manually reviewed and categorized.
In both things. I mean, you can start off with it's easy to do with the Ombudsman, and then see how this can be developed, so that
it's easy to do.
It provides a way of performance managing the service.
Yes.
To see.
Sorry, Nigel, I didn't mean to talk over you there. Thank you for the feedback, everyone. We'll take it away. We'll do some work on the art of the possible. We'll come back. We'll share what we've been able to achieve, and we'll carry on this conversation in future meetings.
The message, the desire is clear, if you like, to help us understand what's going on.
Yeah,
so that's the benchmark, if you like. And now the question is whether the systems and processes and whatever changes can get how close to that they can get.
Yeah, there's just some limitations with the system and with the fact that it's shared across the council system. But the board's
desire to have more information so that actually sort of scrutinising what's happening and in what sorts of things are going on is clear. Sibasiso, you've been waiting to come in. Do you want to come in at that point?
Yeah, I hope I'm not on mute. Am I on mute?
No, you're good now.
Okay.
Okay, so just wanted to check in terms of, is it called targeted families? I think it's called targeted families, because targeted families are also allocated to different patches. Now, when complaints come, and as Nigel was highlighting, if you're then able to see that you've got a large portion of targeted families that have been allocated in a particular ward, and you're getting a lot of antisocial complaints from there as opposed to repairs, or those repairs are because of antisocial behavior, then it just goes to show how to reallocate targeted families, because targeted families have got a different need than general families, right? So it will be useful to know how the allocation of target families works, whilst you actually also allocating spaces, because those complaints could be based on a high portion of targeted families, therefore there's more incidences there, and therefore I'm not saying different families cause different disruptions, but at least then you can tell where the nature of things that is coming from. Would that be possible to tell?
I think we'd have to look into that, so I'm not entirely certain whether or not that is or isn't, but we'll take it away. We've got our list. Okay. We will do some work between now and the next meeting to establish whether or not we can collate that.
So I guess you could frame that point slightly more broadly and say, to what extent is it possible? We had the point about the nature of the stock earlier on. So it's to what extent is it possible to align the pattern of complaints with the social profile of particular areas and see whether or not particular types of household are associated with different volumes of complaints, isn't it? Of which targeted families is one type, or certain sorts of direct lets, whatever it might be, just so that helps understand what might be going on.
Yes,
I guess that. So I'm conscious. No problem. Christine and Peter Edwards, is there anything you wanted to pick up on in relation to the issues of complaints?
No, thanks.
Can I say something? I read through the housing ombudsman one, and one thing that it brought to my attention is after there's no right of appeal. Why is that?
Well, there's two stages with the council's complaints policy. So stage one is responded to by someone in the service area. If you're unhappy with how that was dealt with, you can then request that it's escalated. And stage two gets dealt with by our customer relations team, who are more sort of experts in dealing with complaints. If you're still unhappy after you've got your stage 2 response, you can then go to the Ombudsman.
No, that's right. You can only go to the Ombudsman after. You can't appeal after the second one, though, can you? If I didn't agree with your second reading of the second one, the second appeal, then I have no choice. I have to go to the Ombudsman.
Yeah, we have a two-stage. We have a two-stage.
That then?
Well, that's pretty standard across social housing. Is they have a two-stage complaints policy, and that's what we've got at Bristol City Council, with the option to take it to the Ombudsman for an independent review if you're not happy.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks for that, Peter. So unless anybody else has got anything else on that item, and I can see that our new member, Sivasiso, needs to leave us now, but should we move on to the business plan discussion? Item 6, conscious of the time, we're at 7 o'clock. So
I'll join on the phone. I just need to leave.
Okay, as you can. Right, okay. So business plan and budget for 22-23.
I have to phone you back, Doug. All right.
It is. So Donald will be presenting, but I will share the slides. So if you give me a moment, I will do so.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. I'm aware that several people on the meeting tonight will have already seen this from the councillor's perspective, and any of you who joined from the public meetings that we had as well online. So, but still worth repeating. Basically, this is the branding that we use to promote this conversation through a variety of means, which I'll outline in a moment or two, with a focus on shaping a 30-year plan for investment in council homes. It's important to stress at the outset that even though it says a 30-year plan, we're legally obliged to present what's called our revenue budget on an annual basis to the council. And we've also built into this 30-year plan 5-year staged reviews, so that there can be an in-depth review as to progress on investment and to whether it's meeting the objectives as laid out in the plan, which has been presented to Cabinet last week and will go to Council, I believe, on the 15th of February. Okay, so that what we're going to be showing then is the outcome of the consultation. I think there were 1,471 responses. And as it says, or just basically what I've just repeated, that it will be 1 year and 5-year and 30 years. So there you have it. We had a number of tools. We had a budget simulator, which obliged everyone, whoever they were, to achieve a balanced budget within an envelope of what money was available. And what that did was forced everyone to choose priorities. Those priorities included a rent rise, investment in bathrooms, investment in kitchens, investment in communal areas, for example. So that the tools that we used were the online microsite, which allowed an individual to play around with all the figures, come up with a balanced budget and reflect their own priorities. We also had the online survey, and we commissioned a telephone company, survey company, who contacted 501 individuals, as it says. And then we had a paper exercise as well, as we were conscious that everybody is on a computer or uses a computer, and we wanted to get as many options, or present as many options as possible for people to complete a form. The bottom shows you the source of the respondents, and you can see that the vast majority were residents or leaseholders, with the rest being made up of members of the public and council employees. And I think this reflects, I think, a comment made earlier on by Pete, where did actually the submissions come from? And that bar chart shows you exactly where that came from in terms of a presentation of a bar chart and the concentration around where council homes are. So just one point to make on it is it reflects every ward in the city we managed to get a response from. Okay, so these are the key findings that come out of this survey. As it says, residents were least favourable towards increasing the rent, but all groups were selected to invest more in building new council homes that were energy efficient and improving the blocks. Now, energy efficiency is worth repeating because it was quite remarkable because it showed a depth of awareness really in terms of what's happening to the broader environment and climate change, in that many residents saw improving their energy efficiencies as contributing to that. The council at the moment doesn't offer bathroom replacements. It offers kitchen replacements every 25 years. So this was a new offer that residents responded to. All prioritised building new homes, obviously. Well, not obviously, but they did, as an opportunity to provide more homes in the city, where in terms of housing, social housing, the waiting list is 16,000. Preference for blocks and estates, marginally above investment in blocks and estates, marginally above bathroom replacements, but ahead of kitchens. And support for investment in existing homes was more pronounced in the resident group. So the 30-year business plan is based around these various proposals, increasing rents by CPI plus 1%. And it's important to stress here that any increase in rents will be reinvested back in the existing stock. New build will be paid for from borrowing. What was going to say, additional pound raises £1.2 million, as you can see, and this is where the money will be invested in. £80 million to make homes more energy efficient, and also to achieve by 2030 a C rating in terms of EPC ratings for energy efficiency. And what doesn't appear there is the fact that we're going to do a pilot of investment in 25 properties to try and get in the energy efficiency category A, see how much that costs, what has been the best solutions for that pilot, and then to share the outcomes of that pilot with councillors and the public, so people can evaluate it themselves and see where we go from here. My theme, which I repeat everywhere, is that the bill for retrofitting all housing stock in the city is so enormous at around about £549 million that we really need national government to be stepping in, not just for Bristol City, but for across the country to make that difference as needed. 5,500 bathrooms is reflected in that 12.5 million initial rollout over the 5 years, and the additional 0.5 million on top of the 8.7 million to improve standards in communal areas of the blocks and the estates. And then, as we know, there's a predicted energy crisis and other pressures hitting tenants in everyone's way. And what we've chosen to do is put in a discretionary sum of up to £350,000 for tenants alone who are particularly vulnerable or going through a particular crisis, to see if we can provide additional positive constructive support during that crisis. The number of new homes under this plan in the first 5 years increases to 1720, and by year 6 it is proposed, if all goes well, the 300 council homes per year will be built over the rest of the business plan. And as it says there at the bottom, borrowing, grants and right to buy receipts, be grants from any source, including Homes England, to develop these new homes. Okay, so this is the breakdown of what happens to, excuse me, £117 million rental income, £8.9 million service charges which are being currently reviewed. That is how the service charges are broken down on what people actually pay for. And then we have, as you all know, commercial assets such as shops and garages and we're reviewing what we do with our garages, as there are a high void rate there, and their sites may offer potential for redevelopment. The average rent for council homes is 81.50, national average 85.3, and that illustrates the potential increase of a CPI +1 in terms of 3.34. So as I've already said, priority is to invest in existing homes and service provision, and that's what responsive repairs and maintenance is about. The cost of delivering the service is 31.7 million, and 10.6 million, we have a range of special services. You'll probably be aware from the popular press that the impact of COVID has driven up costs of materials and also created log jams around supply. And the Bristol City is affected as much as anyone else. So we're not quite sure how this will pan out in terms of real costs, but we'll just keep that under review. Cabinet has been, we'll now have to go to council for a full debate, but last night it was at scrutiny, and there were several questions raised at scrutiny by a variety of council members, some of who are here tonight. And we'll have to devise a communication plan to advise all stakeholders of the outcome of this consultation and emerging plans as we go forward following the full council on the 15th of February.
Thanks.
So there we have it. So sorry, Alex.
No, just a thank you. That was, are there particular points that you're looking for?
Any questions?
Or just questions? Okay. I've got Philip first. And you're on mute. Yeah, you're mute. You're still on mute.
All right.
Yep.
As someone with a vested interest in that, I live in sheltered housing. And what shocked me when I first moved here, I have a walk-in shower because I can stand and walk, but not for long, because that's why I've got no teeth. They're all smashed out because when I fall over. But what shocked me was not all supported housing in this block of flats has walk-in showers. My neighbour has just had a walk-in shower fitted after using my shower for 2 years, 3 times a week. And this bathroom upgrade, I feel that as we're getting older and people are getting more vulnerable, then sheltered housing or supported housing, as it's called, supported housing, should be prioritised. Why should a young couple, admittedly with a disabled child, in Northfield have a walk-in shower fitted when that child is only 2 years of age and can be easily put in a bath and taken out of a bath? Why should they get a shower, a walk-in shower, above someone who can't get in a bath because of arthritis, age, or whatever?
Okay.
I just feel the priority should be supported housing, or, you know, elderly EP, what do you call them? Elderly person.
Yeah. There's a disabled facilities grant and adaptation programme provided by the council, which spends over £5 million per annum, which also supports individuals or families living in private sector accommodation. The question about, it's not a question of why not, it's a question of someone seeking an occupational therapist assessment of their living, and if they need an adaptation, and that's supported by the occupational therapist, there's no impediment to that happening. There is, as you would expect, a backlog of that kind of activity. It is demand-led, and we try to turn them around as quickly as possible. So I have no doubt that the couple referred to in the disabled child needed that facility, otherwise they wouldn't have asked for it. But in a sheltered block, if people suffering from difficulties in terms of movement and mobility, and they seek a shower, and it would be the same with the bathroom replacements. If we're putting in bathroom replacements, sorry, offering that rollout program, if people want to have a shower rather than a bath, there's no in principle objection to that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that, Donald. So I've got 3 hands up. So Christine was next.
I'd just like to back up what Phil said. I live in sheltered housing and I have a bath. I'm also on the waiting list for new hips and knees. So once I can no longer get in and out of the bath, it's going to be a long rigmarole to get occupational therapy over to sort it out. And is there any means of expediting provision of showers in sheltered housing?
Krista, sorry.
Donald.
All I was going to say, Christine, is that the team is led by Tom Gilchrist, and you need to register your interest and you need to have an assessment, because it's obviously, as with all things, demand exceeds supply, and the sums are expended, rationed out according to those in most need. So without an assessment, it wouldn't just happen.
I fully understand that, but you know, like at the moment, I can manage, so I would be low on the priority, and it really, you make sure that you can't manage, and then it's too late before you qualify for an assessment and improvements.
Okay, all I can say to you is, if you need the assessment now, you should ask for it, and it will be assessed. But as you say, based on what you've just said to me just now, I've no doubt you would appear as a low priority.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's
agreed. Yeah.
Thanks for that. So I guess there's a question about whether the system can have a sort of anticipatory component in terms of something that you know that's coming, but that is a difficult thing to build into any system of this type, you know, I guess, because current needs low. Okay, so I got 3 hands again. I got Nigel first, and then Sibusiso.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted this time.
No, you are. You're there.
Slight cynicism about the commitment to energy efficiency. I mean, I live in a block that's been waiting for new windows for 12 years because the wrong windows were put in at the time the block was built, and the effect this has on the heating in the block and the costs is astronomical. And it's important because the block is supported housing for the over 60s, with a lot of people who need heating but have to ration it very severely. So if we're going to make a commitment, then we have to look at priorities and have to make sure that promises are carried out. So say we've been waiting 12 years to sort the heating out in this place. We're supposed to be getting it done this year, but there's no sign of anything happening, and I honestly doubt whether it will. The other point I want to make is related to that. And there's nothing in the plan about the categorisation of council housing in terms of the continuation of supported housing. I mean, there are certain blocks that are reserved for age groups, ours is 60 plus, but it's not followed. There are quite a number of people moving in now who aren't 60. And, you know, the difficulty is that the council can't leave a flat empty with a housing crisis, but there needs to be some sort of planning as the effect this has in terms of its desire to fill empty flats compared with its need to reserve certain housing for certain groups. And that needs to be factored into the planning. The final point I want to make is about garaging. We've got 12 garages attached to our block, only 2 of which I think are rented, because the rents on the others are astronomical. I mean, I used to have one. I'm not paying 45 quid a month for a garage that's falling down. So you can make far more money from that by lowering the rent to a level that people will afford. So you haven't got garages sitting there that can't be knocked. Well, it'd be pointless knocking them down to build something on there. There's no space, but you could make money from that. And that's an important thing, that you don't price yourself, you know, out of income. There are also general points to make about building 2,000 houses when there's 16,000 on the list, but all it's national government housing policy, which is a problem for Bristol. And there's not a lot we can do about it.
Okay. So points noted. Civic, would you like to come in at that point? And then we'll take Pete, and then maybe Don will respond to the collection of points as appropriate. Civic, if you're speaking, you're on mute. I can't see you and I can't hear you. So. Right. Okay. Pete, do you want to come in for the minute while we see if
yes,
technological hitch can
be sorted? Thank you for keeping me to last, Professor Marsh, because I have 4 questions. I'll try and keep them quick. So the first picks up on Philip and Christine's point around aids and adaptations. And I note that despite us being the only city to create a combined authority, WECA, the only one of the core cities offered a metro mayor, we're not yet joint commissioning. And in last week's Bristol Post, we had a horrific headline about the number of bed blocking incidents within the NHS. Can I ask Donald whether there is any possibility through perhaps the West of England Combined Authority Metro Mayor for joint commissioning with health, so that the NHS can work collaboratively with the last remaining local authority landlord in Government Office Southwest to alleviate bed blocking by prioritising aids and adaptations and doing what Manchester and Birmingham use, which is to work collaboratively with the NHS to identify patients who are blocking beds because we can't get the aid and adaptation done to make it possible to discharge, and using NHS social services and landlord services money collaboratively to both provide the aid and adaptation in a timely manner and alleviate the bed blocking. So that's my first question.
Okay, that's a long question, so I'll deal with it now. I can't speak for WECA. I'm not engaged with WECA directly. I'm not on the board, but other officers are. All I can say is that public health within Bristol City Council, NHS and adult social care do work collaboratively and put an enormous effort into trying to reduce bed blocking and get people into homes which are fit for purpose for those individuals to enable to release them. Bed blocking is as I'm sure you're aware, and is a national issue. And it's not surprising that it's an issue in Bristol either. But the core of what you're asking in terms of do public health and adult social care and the NHS work together? And the answer is yes. I'm not in a position tonight to give you the detailed outcome of what they do. We can certainly ask Christine, who's the Public Health Director, to provide information in terms of success stories in alleviating bed blocking. But there's no doubt that's a perennial problem.
Thank you. I appreciate the answer, and I'm mindful it will probably inform the review of housing allocations that is currently underway as a priority category for rehousing. Second question, obviously we're talking about a 30-year plan for council homes. The period of the next 30 years covers the city's One City Plan's aspiration towards net zero. Recent quality of life survey shows 86% of residents in Bristol concerned about climate change. You're quoting a £549 million figure to replace the gas boilers. Where within this 30-year plan does that money come from? Or are you hoping for and bidding for central government money?
Two things on that. The 549 comes from an estimate by Savills, which is a national estimate of around about £20,000 a property. And so basically you're applying a national assessment in a crude way to any given geographical area in the country. And the reason why one does that is to illustrate the scale, because it's important that we all know this. There appears to be, it appears to be an emerging common agenda nationally that quotes something has to be done. And then the next question is, well, how do we do it and where are the resources for it? And what is in the business plan is a contribution to that, not the solution. It's the step that is deemed to be affordable within Bristol City Council, which is not an insignificant sum, But what I say to everybody is that, and it's perhaps not my place to do this, but it's Bristol City Council should become an advocate. I don't mean, you know, Bristol as a sort of abstract organisation, but all the parties that make up the leadership of the council to identify or campaign for additional funding, not just for Bristol, but for the national welfare of the country. And that those central government is the body, the only body that can make those funds available.
Thank you. I'm mindful of Alex in the climate team, and you were talking about contribution towards climate change. We previously had a pilot project, Save with Solar Bristol, which has looked at using photovoltaic electric power cells with battery technology. It might not have been Tesla's, but for some reason Tesla's forms to mind there. Obviously, at the time that pilot was put forward under the previous mayor, George Ferguson bid for European Green Capital money, which sadly didn't get spent on council homes, got spent on individual owner occupiers' homes. How would a tenant like myself, who has a relatively efficient home that could benefit from the Save with Solar project, but is nonetheless still living in fuel poverty, get that to move forward? There are only 8 properties, as far as I'm aware, despite the many millions that George bid for, that actually got to take part in Save with Solar Bristol. I'm mindful that we sold the energy company that was going to be part of co-working with that project. That probably caused a lot of delays and a disproportionate delay in the programme. But council tenants like myself were visited by surveyors, were told, yes, your home is perfect for this project, and have been waiting and waiting and waiting without any advancement in the energy performance of our home. What can you say to those of us?
Well, what I can say is the 80 million that's been allocated is going into improving the fabric of the building. There are planned maintenance programs that will be rolled out for replacing old style heaters with modern forms of heating that are less of a carbon footprint and more energy efficient. And that we have put in a bid to WECA for additional investment to try and accelerate that kind of work and improve the energy efficiency of the homes. But as I've already said, this council resources can only do so much, and but the planned maintenance programme over 30 years, which is okay. I understand if you're expecting it today, we're not saying you have to wait 30 years for those improvements to take place. We're prioritising the planned maintenance interventions, and the key top priority is improving the energy efficiency of your home. As to what happened historically and what surveyors came and went and what promises are made, I really don't know. I wasn't here. I don't know what the commitments were entered into, whether the resources were there for it.
Okay, thank you for that update. Final question, you mentioned, and I think it was Vincent and Gorham Homes as the delivery vehicles, new homes, an original target of 2,000, cut back during COVID, now being reinstated. Can you commit that each of the new homes being built will be built to the highest energy performance standard, given that tenants are currently experiencing fuel poverty, are currently looking at £1,600 on average of additional costs as a result of energy and tax and national insurance changes, and are struggling to make choices between eating and heating currently, even before energy and national insurance tax rises take place?
All new build, which is where the council is a partner, whether it's through a pipeline project with Gorham Homes, or whether it's with emerging companies who produce modular homes, we're expecting them to meet the highest attainable target for being carbon neutral and energy efficient. And I mean, that's, as we all know, money is scarce. Land is even even more scarce than money. And we have to basically optimize those opportunities. And it's really important that whether it's the voice of yourself as an individual or the voice of many, that those kind of demands are made of house builders in general, both in the private and in the public sector. Because, you know, owner occupiers, those who rent and build for rent properties or rent generally, or social tenants, developers, in my view, should be playing a leadership role in using not only a very effective supply chain that reduces one's carbon footprint, but also build a product that drastically reduces the energy cost to an individual. And there will be successes and failures along the way, but the trajectory has to be that the maximum energy efficiency of a home is the goal.
Thank you. And obviously, thank you for the consultation responses diagrams on page 20, which are exactly what I would like to see as a board member across other areas. And I will take you up on your offer made earlier in the meeting of working constructively and positively with you outside of this forum to move forward these areas.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Christine, you had your hand up, it's gone down again. Did you want to make a point?
I was just going to briefly say, as Pete mentioned it, that Bristol Energy went bust. I'm now with British Gas, despite being in an all-electric house.
Oh.
Okay, thanks for that. And Sibusiso, you've got your hand up, but your camera off. Are you there?
Yeah. Sorry, I was on the phone, but I couldn't. I couldn't
problem.
hear you. I couldn't speak.
From your third location, would you like to intervene?
So just wanted to check, right? So we've got 1,000 odd tenants that have responded with 28,000 stock, so 3.5% engagement overall. And when looking at how to influence, like the gentleman was saying about showers and so forth, Bristol buys in bulk in terms of their procurement. Is that correct? And therefore, it's normally cheaper to do one size fits all. Yeah. To do bespoke is more expensive because it is social housing. So from a cost perspective, it will be critical that we maximize engagement so that that engagement influences the purchasing power based on large portions of those in adult social care provision. Say they need X, then you know in terms of purchasing that you've had so much engagement, that's what they need. But currently with the low level of engagement, it's really hard to know what the tenants need now or in the future, so that we're not doing two, but we're doing together. Now, I mean, it's a procurement thing here, but procurement will not change if maximum engagement is not reached. So I think maybe we need to set a bar of how much engagement needs to happen so that we can say that surveys have really had maximum engagement. And once they have that maximum engagement of, let's say, 30% of total residents, then you could say this is useful. But at 3.5 to influence a 30-year plan, it's not proportionate, you know? Like the gap is huge in terms of the unheard voices. And I wonder if those 97%, what else would they say compared to what the results have been? It could be completely different. So how do we engage tenants? You know, maybe you engage and you get a voucher to reduce your rent or something, but we need to really see that without the tenant participation, our future forecasts and any goodwill will not be fit for purpose, because they would feel like we are imposing and it's not co-produced. And I think, you know, I love everything that you've said. I love the aspiration of it. I love the 1% saving to repair and do all these things. But if people are not engaged, then they don't know about all these good things. And we need to be able to tell these good stories. We need to be able to tell. And I think we need to make sure that we are influencing purchasing power in one way or another, so that we buy the things that people would like, either it's kitchen or it's windows, whatever it may be. We buy the things that people like, but it is going to be informed by their participation. When people know that and they choose not to engage, then I'll be shocked. But I'm still shocked at the fact that there's only 3.5% engagement, but we need to really make it a priority.
Okay, thanks for that. So I've got Philip, but before Philip, would somebody like to respond to that observation?
Well, the only observations that we can make on that is that the council made every effort to communicate, engage with every tenant. We were helped by ward councillors as well, dropping off notices door to door. Our caretakers doing the same. We used online, we used paper, we used telephone, we used public statements to encourage engagement. And there's always any tenant engagement is always very challenging, especially when you're talking about something which is not immediate, i.e. having a repair done tomorrow or next week or next month. And that will be an ongoing, ever-present challenge, which takes us back to the very start of this evening when Pete Daw and others made their comments about tenant participation, and Liz responded. And as we said, March time, we have to start looking afresh, which is why we've commissioned TPAS, and which is why one of the reasons why Liz sent out her, well, verbally made her invite earlier on. So this will be a journey that never ends, Subishu. The more the merrier, as far as I'm concerned, and the housing team are concerned, but it's just going to be a never-ending challenge.
So, I mean, the importance of participation clearly comes through strongly. I mean, one thing that might be interesting, I don't know whether colleagues in terms of the review might be able to share with the board, or whether TPAS is, I mean, is benchmarking what the proportions that Bristol manages to sort of elicit looks like in compared with other places. You know, I mean, because you might say, well, it's looked at cold, 3% is not great, but you know, you might say, well, actually 3% is pretty much par for the course. We wouldn't necessarily be, I guess you wouldn't necessarily settle for that, but you might say, well, actually, let's be clear how, you know, where this sits relative to what other councils are managing to achieve. And it might be miles away, it's conceivably better in certain cases, but just have a feel for that, you know, because coming to it sort of first off, you think, well, it doesn't sound super, whereas 30%, as you say, would sound more robust. But if it were the case that nobody's managing to get anywhere near that, then at least you'd know the challenge that faced, you know, not just the council, but those who wish to facilitate and build capacity and help people engage. You're saying, well, you're aiming for a target that nobody's hitting at the moment, which isn't to say you don't aim for it, but you know, at least you'd know what the game was, you know.
Alex, just for comparison, I'm aware we're comparing Bristol City Council issues here, but there were a similar number of responses to the council's consultation on the citywide budget. And when you consider that that's a budget that serves a city of 460,000, as I said, I'm aware we're comparing two things within Bristol City Council, but certainly I think our 1,500 responses around our HRA budget was actually quite a good result when you compare it to the amount of consultation that we managed to get from all Bristol citizens around the City Council's budget.
Okay. So I've got Philip first and then Pete Daw.
Yeah, very interesting. But if I can refer to an historic issue, which some people here may know of and others won't. Community at Heart, I was on the board of that in Barton Hill. And we had very, very poor resident response to anything we did. So we came up with the idea, I think it was Nikki Debbie, who used to be a councillor. She came up with the idea, we've got £50 million, which we had, except the council stole 10 million of it in admin fees, but we were left with £40 million. So we gave all tenants the opportunity. We did, if I remember rightly, 3. We did the village plan, we called it. Then we did designing houses, and then we did the road network. And we gave £1,000 per prize to all those who took part went into a draw, and they got 1,000. The winner got £1,000. The second got £500. The third got £250. And then what we did is we did another survey, and we gave all people who took part £5. And then we did another prize draw. Admittedly, it costs money, but employing TPAS doesn't cost 10 shillings. It costs a few £1,000s. Why can't you pick an area? I'm not saying the whole of Bristol, but pick an area where you're getting very little response. Like Southville had very little response to that survey we saw with all the green lines. Or other places had a small response. Where you've got a high density of council properties and you want a survey, concentrate in that area, give those people a chance of winning, I don't know, it's the council, they've got no money, £100 prize in a draw, or, you know, something like that. Or give them all a bus pass for a week.
The point that you're making, Philip, is how can you incentivize people to respond?
Yes.
We are also custodians of public funds, and I personally would not support offering £1,000 prize for participating in a survey.
Oh, you really?
I think that would be the wrong use of public funds. But we do need to look at what mechanisms are available to us to incentivize participation.
But what does it cost to employ TPAS?
That's a totally different.
Well, it
totally
is,
different.
because you're employing them to do a survey. Well, do the survey yourself. You've got officers. You could give £250 prize.
So presume, just I'm very conscious of time.
Yeah.
It seems to me that the general point, which is mechanisms to incentivize participation, it seems to me to be entirely sensible. And the question is what is appropriate and what works is the other thing, you know, and what works for which groups of people. That feels to me like that's likely to be on the table as part of a conversation in reviewing participation. And are there things that could be done that are appropriate to be done that at the moment aren't being done? Is, I guess, maybe that's just the message. It's to say, well, is there space for different thinking? And I'm sure colleagues have got that on their list, and we'll sort of pursue it in the review in terms of what could be done, which is likely to make a difference and is appropriate to the council. I think if that's that seems to be the key point.
Yeah.
What that looks like, we can. I mean, that's to be investigated, and clearly there are constraints that need to be borne in mind in doing that, which I think is Donald's point.
Thank
you, Pete Dole.
Yeah, just very quickly, 2 points which arise from previous conversations. Firstly, picking up on what Philip was saying, I think the very fact that we have cancelled tenancies in Bristol, that we have a viable 30-year business plan, we should cast our mind back what's now over 2 decades to the late Lord Rogers of Riverside's Urban Task Force and the £2,500 deficit of repairs on average in council homes that led to the requirement for 30-year business plans that brought homes up to the decent home standards. We've done that in Bristol in our first 20 years of this regime. We've done it collaboratively with tenants and the council and councillors working together as a tripartite. And I think we should celebrate our success, which goes as far, to pick up the previous point about procurement, that we actually don't necessarily procure a lot of our work. We actually do it ourselves. We make our own windows, we make our own doors, we have our own woodworking team, we have services in-house that other cities across England would frankly kill for. And we are a last bastion of housing management in-house as a result of our prudent past decisions. And I credit the councillors in retaining the stock. I credit the tenants with working with councillors to sacrifice the 20% of the stock that was unviable, that makes the current 30-year business plan work for the future. And I just want to celebrate that success, because in the largest government office region, we are the anomaly. We are the last city-owned landlord service, and we house 1 in 6 people in the city as a consequence. I want to thank the city, the councillors, the stakeholders who make that service continue. 100 years of council housing in Bristol and more.
Something I never fail to mention to students, our uniqueness in the Southwest. There you go. So colleagues, I think we've given item 6 on the budget a reasonable run out there, and there's been some comments and I think some points that are made that I'm sure will be captured in the minutes and will be borne in mind and taken forwards if they weren't already on the list. Can I suggest that we move on to, we've got a couple of other things. One is the date of the next meeting. Will we meet before Easter again? I'm looking to Liz and Sarah.
Yeah, so Alex, you're right, we normally meet every 3 months, so that would make it around April time. So we will come back to the board with a recommendation for our next date around that time.
Okay, so there will be a meeting this quarter, and then any other business. So
yeah, I forgot to give Councillor Reinhardt's apologies. He's at an antenatal class this evening. Otherwise, I would have been here.
We'll make sure that's reflected in the minutes. Anybody got anything else? Sarah, you look like you're about to say something, or you?
No, not at all.
I deny it. I deny it. I wasn't going to say anything. Anybody else would like to raise any other business relevant to the business of this board? No. If not, then I would say finish by saying, well, firstly, welcome once again to new members, both tenants and councillors. I hope you found the experience of being on the board of interest and hopefully instructive in various ways, and there's things to take away, and thanks for contributions all round. And thank you very much. And I will see you again, presumably online next time. We will be, I don't know exactly, I'm assuming that we're going to be meeting remotely next time around.
I think we will do, Alex, but I am conscious of the request for a review of the timeline around that.
Okay,
so
we'll keep hold of that and bear in mind some of the points about access, virtual access, etc. And that's part of the conversation about participation. Absolutely. Well, thanks for everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm off to read a report about rent control.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.